Good Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into It's Official, the weekly banner podcast where Jeff Siegel from First Bet and Jeremy Plonk with Express Bet. We take a look at 5 hot topics in horse racing. But, Jeff, when we're only 31 days away from the Breeders' Cup World Championships in your backyard at Santa Anita, it's going to be a lot of topics that look purple in the Breeders' Cup theme this week.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, this is the last month. But really, for most of these horses, there either are no more preps or there are just one. And this is going to be a very busy week around the country with the final preps in several critical divisions. Keeneland opening up on Friday has just a major race for 2-year-olds on Friday. We'll talk about that later. A couple of important grass races in New York tomorrow, actually, that card that was postponed. And those races will have an impact on the Breeders' Cup, Juvenile Fillies Turf, and then same thing at Santa Anita this weekend. So it is crunch time. Put up or shut up. If you want to show up and run in the Breeders' Cup, you'd better perform up to snuff this week, or you better train well, or you better train, period. That's another thing we'll talk about as it gets close to the big days, Fridays and Saturdays at the end of this month and the beginning of November.
One thing we know for sure, the weather needs to cooperate. It did not last week. Wet on the West Coast, flooding on the East Coast, and it's really thrown a wrench into the schedule. You recall Algiers, the Dubai World Cup runner-up, was going to come east and run in the Woodward last week. It was too wet to run in the Woodward, so they're taking the week off and going to Woodbine for the Durham Cup as a potential prep for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Of course, the Durham Cup run this weekend on the synthetic at Woodbine. So really just changing the plans of a lot of horses, not only in the afternoon in the races and the major preps that have to be hit now in the final week, but also in the training in the morning. Maybe if you got out to the West Coast, you felt like you had an advantage that you were going to train in good weather out there and get the early edge. Arcangelo went out earlier, White Barrio, but wet conditions out there at Santa Anita, they didn't even train a few days, I believe. So it's one of those situations where it's got to dry up, man. We need things to dry up and get these horses back on their pattern, and Mother Nature needs to cooperate, hopefully, over the next couple of weeks. Let's take a look at our first of 5 topics this week on It's Official as we run them down on the big board. The French connections. It was the big one, the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe last weekend at Longchamp in France. Not only the Arc is a Breeders' Cup win and you're in for the turf, but several other races on the undercard. Familiar horses to Americans. We saw Highfield Princess, a horse who came here last year for the Breeders' Cup, back in action in this turf sprint ranks. We're going to look at some of the races in recap from Arc de Triomphe Day, including the main event, where it was the unbeaten 3-year-old who went on from the French Derby success to also notch the Arc de Triomphe. Let's go back and look at the victory by Ace Impact.
Over comes next, Ace Impact, still only 2 or 3 from the back of the field as they enter the closing stages now. Coming through Plastic Carousel, Fantastic Moon, Ace Impact launched up on the outside. It's Hookham and Westover again, the Ascot rivals together to Sim Camille. Ace Impact coming strongly down the centre of the course and also following him through as Ernesto into the closing stages. It is Ace Impact in front, and Ace Impact has won the Arc, remains unbeaten to Westover, Ernesto through 7 seas continuous. Baybridge and Sisfahan who can feed the flame. Sim Camille, Fantastic Moon, a gap to Plastic Carousel, Free Wind, Hayazark, and Mr. Hollywood is the back marker. The favourite has done it, he remains unbeaten. Ace Impact, number 13, Christian De Mero, a winner by a couple of lengths, and boy did he pass some horses.
By the Jean-Claude Rouget trainee. This is a 3-year-old Jeff that looks like he's got credentials to be any kind. When you win the Arc in that emphatic fashion from that far off the pace, with the rally passing that many horses in the final, 400 yards, just a tremendous performance.
You mentioned he could be any kind, and I hope he's the kind that'll continue to race. Right. They really, a perfect season, 6 for 6, began in the French provinces and back in January. That's like starting your career at, I don't know, Golden Gate or Emerald Downs. Worked his way through the ranks, became the best 3-year-old in all of Europe, arguably, at least at the Arc distance anyway. And now he's 6 for 6. He did win a win in your win, but I don't think he's coming. There are no plans for him to come to Santa Anita, but he still may have another race, possibly, maybe on Champions Day at Ascot or maybe even the Japan Cup. But unfortunately, we're not going to see him and hopefully he gets a chance to build on that perfect record. However, good news is that we will see, looks like, good chance the runner-up, Westhofer, is going to come.
Right.
Frankel Colt, a very good colt himself. Won 10 out of 13. He's a terrific horse, won a Group 1 earlier this year. Also won the Irish Derby last year. He's a very formidable horse. And when you consider his form and that of Rebel's Romance last year, who came over from Europe and won the Breeders' Cup Turf, I mean, he's a better horse, I think, anyway,
Sure.
at least at this stage. So if he comes and that's the plan, that means that Europe and France will be more than ably represented, at least from the ARC anyway.
And you speak of the Breeders' Cup Turf Division and last year's winner, Rebels Romance. A bit of news out of the Turf Division as we're right here talking it. Last week's race, the Joe Hurst Turf Classic, was washed out in New York, so rescheduled from last Saturday to this coming Saturday. It'll be 4 weeks out from the Breeders' Cup instead of 5 weeks, so those horses will have a little bit less return time. But we expect, again, when the entries come back out for this Saturday, that the top 3 finishers of last year's Breeders' Cup Turf will all be back in action in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic. They were entered in the original edition this past weekend. Let's stay in France as we talk about these French connections. The Prix de l'Abbé winner, Highfield Princess. She's one of the top sprinters in the world on the grass. She disappointed a little bit last year in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint when running at Keeneland. May she fare better in a return trip to Santa Anita? Let's hope we see her after this impressive effort here in the Prix de l'Abbé.
Kurdos against the running rail in behind those. Highfield Princess in the red jacket is next as they head down towards the last 200 metres. Perdika, blue jacket, red and white on the sleeves. De Pontos in second place. Highfield Princess get ahead is there. White Lavender's in behind those two asymmetric. Makarova coming home strongly as well. Perdika to Highfield Princess as they race towards the line. Highfield Princess in the red has done it, has gone through to win.
A cavalry charge to the wire in there. And that's about what we expect in a turf sprint at 5/8 of a mile at Santa Anita as well. I mean, I don't think there's going to be a lot of separation. You're going to have to be able to win a close decision to win the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint this year. She'd be a major contender if she comes back.
Yeah, I actually picked her last year based on her form, and she did not run well there. She didn't break that well. She got caught wide. Then they kind of grabbed her because they didn't want to rush out. The whole thing was a mess. But this year, she had the 19-hole going a 5/8 straightaway. They were talking about how poor that post was. It's a straightaway. I don't know why it would be bad. But anyway, she broke running. She showed good stalking position, pace. She dug down deep in the final 50 yards or so, exerted her superiority, and won her 14th career race from 38 lifetime starts. She wasn't always this good. She started out kind of modest.
Right.
It took a long time for her to actually become a good race mare. And in the last couple, 2-3 years, she has been. And while they didn't commit right off the bat to coming, you could tell that was in the back of their mind. And I think if she's well in the next week or so, you'll see that announcement that she's coming. She's very good on firm ground. And that's one thing I wanted to point out here. Not only with the ARC, but in this race and the other races we're going to show. Very unusually warm weather in France on Sunday, and the ground was quite firm. I don't know if you could say it was as firm as it will be at Santa Anita, but it was close. So if you ran well, any horse that ran well in any of the races there, the connections know that they should be able to replicate that form here. And that might make the plane pretty full coming over from France, because I think a lot of these guys will take advantage of it, and I think Highfield Princess will be on that plane because she absolutely is world class and absolutely deserves a chance to do this year what she was unable to do last year.
In many years, that ARC card is run in a swamp, right? And so, like, horses who have success or run poorly there, you don't know, well, what are we going to get next out when they come to the U.S. and the ground's completely different. Very interesting. You mentioned the firmness of the ground there at Longchamp over the weekend, that it could play more traditionally like the U.S. ground, and this could be something that we want to look at when we handicap the grass races come Breeders' Cup week. Well, in the mile division on turf, Kinross was expected to be the main player in the Prix de la Forêt, and that's a horse who we think could come here and be a major contender in the Breeders' Cup mile. But at the wire in France, we found we might have yet another contender for the mile. Let's go take a look at an upset win by Kalina.
Then comes Top Gear as Pogo continues to make the best of his way home, leading.
Oh. Let's try that again.
Then comes Top Gear as Pogo continues to make the best of his way home, leading to Kalina and National Service. Kinross under pressure, should have been a ring is behind those. King Gold is running on, heading down now towards the last 200 meters. Kalina, Maxime Gill in the blue and white. Kinross has to switch there, should have been a ring up against the running well. Pogo behind those, Kalina in front. Kinross coming at this leader. Kalina though has spoiled the Dettori party. Kinross was second, should have been a ring. Pogo, King Gold, Happy Romance, an extra behind those.
Most notably, Frankie Dettori, the legendary jockey, retiring at season's end, his final Arc Day card. They thought he'd get the victory there with Kinross. So the spoiling of the party for Frankie. But Jeff, our benefit is we may have another contender in these 3-year-old fillies coming from France to the U.S. for the Breeders' Cup. They've done well in the mile over the years.
They sure have. And Kalina was 28-1 in this race. She is a daughter of Frankel, and she was a Group 3 winner against 3-year-old fillies earlier this year. But she looks like she's really coming around now. This was by far her best race, and she beat a legitimately tough group of older horses going a mile. And so I wouldn't put it past her to come over here and with 5 weeks rest and duplicate that form. She's obviously got good tactical speed, bred out of this world, getting better with leaps and bounds. Why shouldn't she be here? Why shouldn't she come? It's got almost like got nothing to lose. Why not?
Right.
You know, it's the end of the year anyway. And if she does come, you'd have to think that she would be right there with those colts over there that ran in that race that she beat would be among the favorites. We don't really have, I don't think, a stick out. I mean, now, there were a couple, at least one anyway, Paddington, if you remember him. I thought maybe he was going to come. He's going to run on Champions Day, so he's not coming. And maybe some of the very, very best milers over there that I was counting on will not come. And if that's the case, then why not bring Kalina? She's right there.
Right. We'll see who shows up on the plane. Now, for the 2-year-old fillies, the juvenile fillies turf division, we had a win and you're in the Prix Marcel Boussac. This was a race where the Justify filly, Opera Singer, was very impressive, winning by daylight.
Le Pavo is next as they head down inside the final 300 meters. Opera Singer extending away in front here. Leader's got to be 3 lengths to Rose Bloom in second place. Le Pavo behind those, but inside the last 200 meters, Opera Singer not going to be caught. She's won it handsomely. Rose Bloom is second. Le Pavo, Rivoltavia, Darnation behind those to Julica, Extraordinaire Freville, Voodoo Magic, and they trail back to Zamdi.
Blaze carrying the colors that we've seen so many times over the years in the Breeders' Cup, the blue and orange, Tabor, Magner Smith, the Coolmore clan, as they call them. This is one, if she comes over for the juvenile fillies turf, they're going to have a hard time taking her off the tote board as the favorite.
Well, here's the thing. Usually when you have a winner book favorite for the Guineas, as she is, they don't bring their very best. They don't have to, I mean, they can win with a second, third, or fourth stringer and then put a filly like this away and get her turned out and let her grow up and then bring her back for the major classics next year. But I'm not so sure she wouldn't come. This is a group that loves to win Breeders' Cup races. Let's face it. They love to come to California. I don't think O'Brien has to scratch his head and say, I wonder if she's good enough. No, I don't think she's good enough. Did she like firm ground? Yeah. She was running over top of the ground there. Is she informed? Sure. She hasn't been over raced. I mean, again, it wouldn't make for much of a gamble if she came over here, but if Opera Singer comes over, it would be a treat. I mean, and she's a Justify. I mean, we want to see all the good Justifies we can, and she is the best that he's had so far. And I got to tell you, she is spectacular. And the daylight of feel like that, which you don't often see, as you pointed out to me. That was just a superior performance.
We'll see more of the 2-year-old filly division. We've still got the Jessam in the run at Keeneland and the Miss Grillo delayed and will be run Wednesday in New York. So we'll see what the Americans have in the 2-year-old filly division, but that Irish filly in France, Opera Singer, awfully strong off of that performance. Let's go to our second topic as we leave France and head to New York for Cody's Wish and Cody's last dance. Will it be his last dance, his final career start in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, a return bid there after winning in the Vosburg this past weekend? We'll let you see it first and then get Jeff's reaction on Was he impressed or not?
A half mile in 46 seconds. They come off the turn and into the stretch. And here is Cody's Wish up to challenge. Accretive for the lead. Great Navigator is down at the rail. It's three of them across. It's Cody's Wish and a very tough Accretive who continues to battle on as they hit the 16th pole. Cody's Wish now edges clear. And Cody's Wish back to sprinting, back to winning today in the Vosburg.
Time effort from Cody's Wish. Is he as good as he was back when he won the Met Mile in the spring? Is he as good as he was when he won the Dirt Mile last year at Keeneland? Does either of that matter as he heads back to the Breeders' Cup? He's just got to be ready one more time.
Well, the answer to the first two questions, no and no. He's not as good as he was last year, and he's not as good as he was earlier this year. Last year, after he won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, life and death by a neck, he had previously won the Forego, earning a 112 buyer number. This year in this prep, he earned a 100. So it just gives you a pretty good indication of how far he slipped, which doesn't mean that he slipped like he can't run. He's still top class, obviously. And it was good to see him win this race. And he did so despite a slow start. But last year's version was better. And last year's version of Cody's Wish barely won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile because he doesn't really want to run two turns. He's far more effective at one turn. And now he's not even, I don't think, as good now as he was then, which puts him in a very precarious position. If he runs in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, no one will be cheering and yelling louder for him than me, but he's not going to be on my ticket. I'll lose. He can beat me, but he's a bet against. And that kills me to say that because I'm more of a racing fan than a gambler anyway. And I'd love to see him win it, but I just can't see it. Not now. And that's that. I mean, Accretive is a nice horse, but come on. So disappointing, even in victory. One more race. If it was mine, he'd win in the Cigar Mile. He's not mine. So, and I can't convince anybody he can't win the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile because he won it last year. But last year,
and he'll go off favored.
Yeah,
he'll be the favorite. You're the favorite in $1 million race. It's hard to say not run.
Right. No, I mean, I don't blame them. I just think that I would like to see him go out a winner, and I don't think that's happening. Out here in California.
If not Cody's Wish in the Dirt Mile division, we start to look around at some other potential contenders. And to Churchill, we go next for the ACAC Stakes last weekend, where it was Zozo's favorite in the one-turn mile in Louisville. Let's see how it turned out.
Off the turn, Stage Raider needs to find a way through. Three Technique switches to the far outside as they race for the mid-stretch marker. Zozos is still in front, and he's shaken up now. The lead is 2. Stage Raider fights on. 3 Technique putting in a final try. Zozo still the leader. Stage Raiders coming on once again. 3 Technique down the center, but Zozo's finishes strong and wins it by a length on the wire.
So this is a Brad Cox trainee who went through the Triple Crown grind a year ago at 3, now aged 4. It's a good win for him, but I don't think he beat a whole lot in there. 3 Techniques, okay. Stage Raiders, okay, but not world-class horses. But we don't always get the world-class type horses in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. There are years life is good is in the Dirt Mile, but there are a lot of years, too, where a Caleb's Posse or a horse like that can win the Dirt Mile. It doesn't take an absolute tremendous superstar to win that race some years, and this year just kind of feels like it might not.
Right. I mean, Zozo's earned a 99 buyer number in this race, which is fine. That's about what he does. Looks to me like he's most effective around one turn going a mile at Churchill. Yeah. He did this when he won. He did the same thing when he won the Knicks Go. Of course, last time out, he faded in the Island. I think the key to Zozo's, unlike maybe Cody's Wishes, he can be just as effective two-turning, but you have to let him roll. You don't slow him down. In the Island, they went 48 to the half, 112-3, and he got mad and just didn't finish. But if you're going to run him a mile, let him roll out of there. I don't care if there's another sprinter in there or not. You grab him and take a hold of him, he's just not going to finish. So I wouldn't completely rule him out, but I think with him, his best chance depends upon the tactics that Brad Cox employs. And even in this race, while he wasn't blazingly out of it, he was still going in 46 and change. And he was on the lead, so he wasn't being guzzled. You can't guzzle him. But that was a good, solid race. But, you mentioned something earlier in the program. I'll just drop in here if you don't mind. that Algiers
Mhm.
was going to run last week in the Woodward. He's going to run in the Durham this week, and that's a horse that right now, if he doesn't stub his toe in Canada,
Mhm.
I might end up picking him in the Breeders' Cup Mile based on his form in Maidan in the Dubai World Cup at 1.25 miles. I like him. I think he's a really, really good horse. And right now, I think I would pick him over the two that we just saw. That could change after this week. But Algiers is something that, keep it in your hip pocket just in case, because the major contenders right now, Jeremy, they just don't do a lot for me. So
no, the dirt mile division feels like it lacks brilliance. It almost feels like a year where if you had a really good sprinter, stretch them out and see what happens.
Yeah.
And just see if you just can't run them off their feet and just go with it, because I don't think the route speed's that brilliant. And you got a lot of horses who are a little bit longer, shortening back to the mile. It just feels like a race, like a brilliant horse who's really fast, 6-7 furlong sprint type with early speed could just go cooking out there.
I know it'll never happen, and I'm not even suggesting that they should do this, but can you imagine if they pulled an audible and called an audible and put Echo Zulu in there going a mile? It's not like she hasn't won 2 turns. She won the juvenile as a 2. You put her on the lead, and then you would never even know which way she went. So but it's not going to happen. But given what you just said, the scenario you described, there's got to be somebody out there who might have the same idea anyway.
Right.
So.
Well, Steve's got 3 or 4 sprinters, and we were talking about it a week ago. Like, what does he do with all these filly and mare sprinters, and how's he going to keep them apart from each other and such? And Winchell's over the years has really supported the dirt mile. He's run a lot of horses in that race over the years. So I wouldn't be shocked. That's not that bad of an idea. And when you think about the way they had the horse in the dirt mile at Parks, the big favorite who didn't run that well, it just kind of, I don't know, I mean, I'm just looking for somebody to pop some brilliance in that.
Yeah, like if they did that with Goodnight, I wouldn't have any great confidence that he would keep going,
Right.
They got others that might, the ones that have proven, even the filly. Now, that's not happening, but there may be others out there that might have the same idea.
Bafford's got a lot of horses in his barn. It's an in-between division. He can't run them all in the sprint, and he can't run them all in the classic. So
he'll have something in there. Yeah.
He'll have something with a little brilliance to it that's probably going to be worth considering in the dirt mile division. Let's go next to the classic division, and a race that was the Awesome Again Stakes at Santa Anita, but the conditions weren't too awesome. They were less than awesome, and the performance maybe just as blah as the headline suggests. Slow Down Andy wins the Awesome Again, but is he really classic material? Let's go back and take a look at the 1 1/8 Awesome Again over the soupy conditions.
They have a 1/4 mile to go. Slow Down Andy, Defunded, and National Treasure well clear of the rest. And Slow Down Andy digs in, has a 2-length lead. Now it's 3 with a furlong left to go. Defunded is trying to get to him in second. Then National Treasure, Senor Buscador in the middle of the racetrack. Slow Down Andy by 2 over Defunded. It pays to be Calbred. Slow Down Andy on his way to the Breeders' Cup Classic with a wire-to-wire win in the Awesome Again. Defunded, Senor Buscador. Skinner was on the scene battling for a minor reward with National Treasure.
Baffert speed in the race, and they hand the lead over to Slow Down Andy. He ran decent fractions, but you're almost wondering were they worried about the track conditions and everybody coming back and getting really tired with the drying out track there at Santa Anita on Saturday? Did they overthink it a little bit in conceding the lead? I mean, Slow Down Andy just took control of that and never gave it back. I can't see that kind of scenario when they get to a Breeders' Cup Classic and to hold it over 1 1/4 miles. But he's a nice horse, but do nice horses win the big one?
I tell you what, I watched this race. I picked Slow Down Andy. I thought he was going to win. And to me, the first thing that came through my mind as they passed the wire for the first time was, all right, the race is over. I mean, they're not catching him. They've handed him this easy lead. He hasn't spent 1/10 of his energy to get there. He didn't have to be sent. He drove running. He fell into it. Jock looked around. Where is everybody? The track was, I thought, favorably, at least kind of speed, if not pro-biased. It was very glib, very fast, sealed track. And he was just, his ears were up. There was not one real effective closer in the entire race to begin with. Who was going to possibly come get him? Nobody. Then in the top of the stretch where I was kind of hoping I'd see him like re-break, and he starts swishing his tail and he's going up and down, but there's nobody coming, and he wins the race, and that's nice. He did it with a 101 Beyer number. That's not going to win the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he did so with the absolute pristine trip. No pace, easy fractions, nobody near him, nobody challenging him, no late speed, fair track. This was slowed down, and it was only 1.8 miles. So this I still, and again, they're going to the Classic, but man, I'd love to see him in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Now, there's a race he can win, and he ran in it last year and ran very well. Yeah, but they're going to go for the big prize, and on the one end, you might say to yourself, why are they doing that? But then maybe they're thinking, who am I have to worry about? Why couldn't he go an extra furlong? Maybe the 3-year-old, but other than that, if he doesn't show up, why couldn't he win the Classic? So I understand the reasoning behind going from this race to the Breeders' Cup Classic rather than backing up to the dirt mile, but he's another one. I liked him. I like the horse. He's a nice horse. He's not going to be on my ticket anywhere in the Classic.
Well, maybe we'll find a horse for your ticket in the Woodward Stakes. We mentioned Algiers had scratched out of that race, and that left Zandon to heavy favoritism. He's been a horse who's been knocking around in the handicap division since last year's Triple Crown season ended, and he was solid there as a 3-year-old, winning the Bluegrass in April of his 3-year-old season. This is his biggest win since then, though, winning the Woodward.
Tyson being asked for more. Zandon is alongside and will need some racing room as they hit the top of the stretch. 3/4 in 10-2. It is Film Star who has come away with the lead. Law Professor, Zandon on the outside with Tyson. Charge it looking for a way through. Zandon is now kicking in. Here comes Zandon on the outside, and Zandon has taken the lead in deep stretch. And Zandon is going to get his Grade 2 victory here in the Woodward as he pulls away at the end. Zandon by 4.5 lengths. Film Star held second, and Law Professor was third.
With all these prep races, you have to wonder, who are they beating? They're spreading out. There's a lot of different options to run against, horses to avoid, that sort of thing. There are no big heavyweights in the handicap division. There's not much behind him. But I like what I saw from Zandon in that particular spot, and I've always liked this horse a little bit. I don't know if I like him enough to win a Breeders' Cup Classic, but he seemed like a horse you could consider in the Superfecta as we look here a month out.
I would not throw him out. I liked his race. Now, it wasn't unlike Slow Down Andy. This horse had to take some dirt. He was between horses. He didn't get the greatest of trips. I thought it was good. I really did. It was and if you look at his form critically, he really isn't bad. I mean, he was a distant second to Wida Barrio and the Whitney, but Wida Barrio kind of freaked that day. In fact, even being beaten 6 lengths, Zandon earned a triple-digit Beyer. Before that, nothing wrong with running second to Cody's Wish, and Cody's Wish was Cody's Wish, with Wida Barrio behind him in the Met Mile. What's wrong with that, right? The thing that always kind of grabbed me, though, about him is that going into this race, he'd run 10 races and he'd lost 12 races. He'd lost 10 times. He only had 2 wins. Yeah. So he was the kind of horse that you say, what about the Superfecta or whatever? Yeah. Sure. I mean, I would be absolutely surprised if he wasn't right in the frame somewhere. Whether or not he's good enough to win, I don't know about that. But he belongs, and I believe he will go 1.25 miles. I like this race. In his last 7 starts, he's only failed to achieve a triple-digit Beyer number 1 time. So he's consistent, he's genuine, and maybe this was the confidence-building win that he needed. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to pick him to win, but would you be shocked if he won the Breeders' Cup Classic? Probably not, because he's in good form and maybe with some improvement in him. So I liked the race. I did.
See how he trains, gets out to Santa Anita, how he gets over the track, that sort of thing like that. He's one that could be live on the ticket, certainly for the exotics. He's not going to be a heavy favorite or anything like that. I mean, he's going to be 10, 12, 15 to 1 in a Breeders' Cup Classic situation. So keep an eye on Zandon. Now, a couple other horses as we talk about this headline of Less Than Awesome. Is Less Than Awesome news for a couple Classic Division rivals for these horses that we looked at. White Abario missed a workout where the veterinarians did not permit him to work. He's out at Santa Anita earlier to train. veterinarians did not allow him to work last week because of an issue. Now he worked on Monday, so he's back on pattern, but he missed the work. Not the greatest of scenarios for the Rick Dutcho trainee once he got out to Santa Anita, Jeff.
No, and I'll tell you one thing about the vets and the stewards out here. They don't mess around.
Mhm.
I mean, you think Kentucky was tough. Out here, if you're not right, we're not even going to let you work.
Mhm.
And that's the situation with White Barrio. I don't know what kind of issue he may or may not have, but he's one to really watch closely. God, I hope the race needs him. I hope he's in there, and I hope he makes it all right. But like I say, unless you're perfect or close to it, you aren't going to get your chance out here. There's no more of this gray area. You're either going to fit or you're not. And we'll have to track White Barrio. And I think that might be the same situation that Pletcher has with Forte.
Yeah, for the second time at least that we know of this year, Forte's got a foot problem. Front left this time. It was front right before the Kentucky Derby when the vets forced him to scratch there. And then, of course, he missed the Preakness because he was on the vets list Derby week and not eligible to come off the vets list and run on 2 weeks. Now comes a quarter crack situation, as reported by trainer Todd Pletcher into the racing press. I believe Dave Grenig of DRF had the story first. Quarter cracks are, you hear anything from a hangnail to a big problem, I mean, they can be a big problem, but a horse with bad front tootsies is not a good situation to be in. And a lot of times corrective shoes, bar shoes, glue-ons, things like that would be used to kind of help a horse who's got problems with cracked hooves and they don't get over the ground as well in those kinds of shoes. They slip a bit. So it takes them off of their maximum peak performance, even if they can kind of get the situation fixed. For Forte, not only does he have that going on, he's got the clock that he's battling, not just his foot, Jeff, but the calendar and the clock. Time's ticking, man. He hasn't worked once since the Travers Stakes, and we are 31 days from the Breeders' Cup.
And if you count down backwards from the race, how many works would he be able to get in 31 days? You wouldn't work him, up. You have to give him a week in between the work and the race.
Yeah.
So that means that if he were to work tomorrow, he could get in 3 works. Is that enough to have him fit to go 1.25 miles? And what, considering that he hadn't, and what's the point of trying to rush him into the race? I mean, he's too good a horse to run him at less than 100%, and he clearly is going to be that. I just don't see the. Sure, you can keep trying, but it's almost to a point now where it's either in the next couple of days or it's just not going to happen. And even if it is the next couple of days, doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just unfortunate, but that's an issue they're going to have to take care of. And there are races next year for him if they want. So if you don't make this one year, get him right. And there's some really big races in the early part of this year, not only down at Gulfstream, but certainly overseas if you want to do that, if that's what you want to do. So I'm not really banking on Forte at this stage.
And you talk about the scrutiny of the vet team in Southern California on a day-to-day basis. Then you throw in the Breeders' Cup microscope that goes with that and all the cameras rolling in the media there. Even if they get a couple good works in him in New York and he comes out here to California, all eyes. I mean, Forte is going to be the most watched horse because we know what happened Kentucky Derby week, right? Sure. So, like, every little step is going to be scrutinized with him. I mean, that doesn't make it more likely something would happen. It's just to say that nothing can go wrong from this point forward. Everything has to break absolutely right for this horse in order to make the gate for the Breeders' Cup Classic. So if you're betting futures right now, Forte's probably a standoff. You don't want to be getting into Forte in a future right now for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Wait it out and see. Like Jeff says, and I kind of have that same inkling, he's probably less likely to run than to run at this point. We've got to start seeing some workouts with Forte. We mentioned White Barrio. He did get back on the work tab after missing that work last week on the vet's recommendation. So he's at least back on pattern. Can he come out of that work healthy and work again in every 6-7 days between now and the Breeders' Cup? Because that's what you're looking at right now. You want your horses working on time, right on pattern, 6-7 days in between. Then they're going to have some travel. A lot of these horses take an extra couple days to acclimate once they get on the grounds. and then maybe get one work, two maximum over the track at Santa Anita before the big one. So that's a look at the less than awesome classic division, really, as we headlined it. But outside of Arcangelo, who's out at Santa Anita, training well by all indications at this point, it is a less than awesome classic division right now, and it's Arcangelo's to lose. Let's go to our fourth topic, the Breeders' Cup tracker. We've been tracking Breeders' Cup since the top, but got a little grab bag here with multiple divisions to look at. Let's take a look at Adair Manor winning the Zenyatta Stakes in almost walkover fashion at 1-9 odds. She'll be one of the headliners locally for the Breeders' Cup Distaff.
Adair Manor coming to the 8th pole. Hernandez sitting still on Adair Manor, galloping through the stretch all by herself, completely outclassing the Zenyatta field. This will be her 5th straight win and 4th graded stakes. Adair Manor trots in by 5 lengths.
So, Jeff, what do you make of her? She's got the record, no question about it. She's got the credentials. She scared off everybody on the West Coast. It's not a particularly good division for the Distaff division this year in California. You don't have, a Zenyatta by the namesake of that race in the division out there. How good is she, and what can we expect of her in the Distaff?
Well, she does have the home court advantage, and that's good. But, man, I'm telling you, she's done everything asked. But as you saw in the last race, she was never asked because she didn't have to be asked. One thing I've noticed about Adair Manor over the years, and that is she always looks like she's got so much left. Like in this race, she never was asked to drop. She just kind of cantered around. But I've never really seen her give me what I want to see when she is asked. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You're expecting this massive explosion, and when they turn her loose, there's just not that much there. It's kind of unique. Usually when you get a filly winning that easy and there's so much left over that you could expect her to re-break, she doesn't do that.
Right.
I'm not going to be playing her in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. As much as on form she looks like she's good, she's speed over a track that's kind of speed. I just don't think she's beating anything here. And I think there are at least a few over back east that would be doing the same thing to this group as she has, only easier and faster. Numbers wise, she's never cracked the triple digit buyer number plateau. Right. I think she is what she is. She's good enough to look good against this group, but against the best, I'm going to be gambling against her. And if she beats me, I tip my hat to her because that's fine. But I'm not sold.
She is the West best elder female horse for the Distaff division. Maybe the East and Midwest will be decided in the Spinster Stakes on Sunday at Keeneland, where we see Nest back in action there, one of the top fillies for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So we'll get more clarity on the Distaff division after this weekend. The Sprint division had Dr. Schivel as a nose defeat 2 years ago after he won the Santa Anita Sprint Championship going into the Breeders' Cup. Well, 2 years later, fast forward after a very light 22 campaign, Dr. Schivel was back in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship trying to win that race for the second time in 3 years, and he got the job done.
They're at the top of the stretch, and Speedboat Beach and Dr. Schivel are head and head. Dr. Schivel just in front, Speedboat Beach, and here's Fort Bragg finishing strongly in the center of the racetrack. Dr. Schivel and Speedboat Beach are head and head coming for the wire. Dr. Schivel or Speedboat Beach. Here's the line. Dr. Schivel has won the Santa Anita Sprint Championship again. Speedboat Beach ran lights out and just missed. In behind them, it was Fort Bragg in third, followed by Sir Atticus.
Good effort there. He never let the runner-up buy him in the gallop out. That's why we left that there. This is the kind of race that you kind of got even for the Breeders' Cup, not purse-wise, but he lost the tough decision to Aloha Beach in that one at Del Mar a couple years ago. Now he gets the nose in the right direction here. Dr. Schivel's strong, and I like to see local sprinters running in their backyard for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. That's going to be California speed, well represented in this year's Breeders' Cup Sprint.
I've been a little harsh on him for not being able to follow through when he looked like he might be able to win. Did that in the Bing Crosby, did it in the Breeders' Cup Sprint a couple of years ago at Del Mar. But this time he really looked like he wanted to win. I give him full credit here. Down on the inside, very live horse, Speedboat Beach, the comebacker in the Baffert barn, fired his best shot. But Dr. Schivel was never going to get beat by that colt. And then again, I'm glad you did show the gallop out because there was still something left. And now he's got 5 weeks in between races. And I think Dr. Schivel is going to be very formidable in the sprint. It's going to be a very difficult race. There's 4 or 5 in there that are very fast on numbers that are just as fast as Dr. Schivel. Dr. Schivel, though, has won now 4 out of 6 lifetime at Santa Anita. The horse angle always tough, and he'll have plenty of time or enough time in between races to fire a similar shot. I don't know if the off track moved him up or not. He'd never run on it, but he handled it fine, which is good. Dr. Schivel should be among the first 4 favorites for sure on Breeders' Cup Day.
You got Elite Power coming back, of course, the defending champion from the East. What will they do with Gunite? Will they cut him back in distance and sprint? You got the fillies that could go into the sprint ranks. Yeah. We talked about this early, and I didn't make the connection until kind of just watching that replay. But what about Speedboat Beach in the Dirt Mile? It's a race for horses that are a little bit less than the top class. Is Speedboat Beach good enough to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint? Maybe not. But that old 2 sprints in a route, that handicapping angle that a lot of people like off the long layoff, Speedboat Beach, might be a horse to stretch out and see what he can do.
If memory serves, I think he did win 2 turning as a 2-year-old.
On the grass, I think.
On the grass, yeah. Is he by Bayern? I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, there, he can go a mile, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past Bob to do that. I really wouldn't. In fact, I'll ask him when I see him the next couple of days or so. Just to get an idea. He might feel that stretching him out off this just one the sprint might not be good. But yeah, I can tell you one thing about him: the chances are very strong that he would be in front. And anytime you're in front, going. I remember when Golden Sense won it out here. I mean, I wasn't sure he could go a mile. He just ran everybody off his feet. He was exhausted in the last 16th, but he kept going because that's what horses do at Santa Anita. So it's not that far-fetched, really.
Let's talk a few other divisions here on our Breeders' Cup tracker quickly. The City of Hope Mile Run. Hong Kong Harry was the victor there, but he's not eligible for the Breeders' Cup. You don't see a supplement there?
No, not even close, because first of all, he's a gelding. You can't really take advantage of it. If he wins that, we can stand him somewhere. You can't do that. I always say, and I was glad to hear Phil D'Amato say the same thing in so many words. He says the goal with geldings is to keep them running, and it's not like we're going to retire him or anything like that. We want him as good at 9 as he is at 5 or 6. And which is to say, you do what you do with him. You give him 4, 5, 6 races a year. He'll keep healthy. You point for the right races. You don't want to put up a couple of 100,000 in a race like this where he may not even be good enough to win anyway, which, by the way, I don't think he would be. But then there are other races. He's going to run in the Seabiscuit at Del Mar. You could run him maybe in a race like the Pegasus World Cup Turf or maybe even overseas. I don't know, but he's not running, and that's the wise choice.
Breeders' Cup Mile news there. We've got Breeders' Cup Mile big prep race coming up at Keeneland on Saturday with the Keeneland Turf Mile there, where Up to the Mark is back, a horse we haven't seen since Belmont Stakes Day. And you talk about a horse who's been kind of quiet, light work tab. Can Pletcher get up to the mark, up to a Breeders' Cup race? Can he get him ready to go the mile distance at Keeneland off the bench in Grade 1 company, where he's going to take on an awfully good one there, because Master of the Seas for Charlie Appleby's in that race off a big win in North America. So Master of the Seas, Annapolis in that race for Pletcher as well, and up to the mark. So Breeders' Cup Mile division is going to get a stern test come Saturday at Keeneland.
Yeah, that's a tough, way tougher race than the race we out here, the City of Hope. I mean, I picked an allowance horse to win that race, and he ran second at 8-1, and he's not even in the same, stratosphere as the horses there at Keeneland. So the situation was good for Astronomer, but that race at Keeneland is a real prep. I mean, I'd like to see Todd's horse run well. I don't know. I haven't seen any video of him breezing. I don't know how fit he is, but he's a good horse up to the mark. And if he could come back, even if he doesn't win, but if he shows that he's close to being fit, then he can come here to California and have a legitimate chance.
As we mentioned earlier, there's some European big-name horses like Paddington, who we don't think are coming over now. Tahira, another one in the Breeders' Cup Mile division. So maybe that race is a little more open than if some of the big heavyweights had come overseas for it. So we will see who shows up in the mile division and what we get from the stateside race at Keeneland coming up on Saturday. We always want to look ahead to a star of tomorrow with a big maiden or lounge win, stepping up a horse rising in class and rising through our radar. And our star of tomorrow this week came from September 28th at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet. Todd Pletcher's second-time starter, Moonlight. Let's take a look at this impressive maiden breaker.
As they come for the head of the stretch, Stolen Magic and Moonlight, they remain right together as they pass the 3/16 pole. And here is a Moonlight who has taken over the lead now from Stolen Magic. And Moonlight draws away. Moonlight opening up on the field here. Moonlight by 5, by 6, and more. Moonlight, much the best. And it looked like Malarchik came on to get up for second to complete the exacta. Stolen Magic faded to third.
The Pletcher barn just reloading with more prospects, Jeff.
Nice colt. I mean, got beat in a really tough race at Saratoga. First time out on the grass by a very good colt. Comes back here on dirt, airs, earns a good figure, does it the right style, full of run. Looks like he's certain to run on. Colt by Audible. Good mover. I'd like to own him. I can tell you that I'd be really high on him. I don't know how ambitious they're going to get. But he definitely looks like a colt that will have no difficulty with that at distance. Right. Whether or not they want to rush him into the Remsen or just take an easier path, I don't know. But right. There's races that he has a chance to win next winter that will make him a very important colt if he continues to develop as I think he will.
Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill, Remsen in New York, and then on the Florida, there are places that you can run with a good-looking 2-year-old who's got route aspirations for next spring. Let's wrap things up here, talking a little bit about some races of the next few days, Jeff, quickly. The Miss Grillo Stakes and the Pilgrim, two-year-old races, part of that 2-year-old Future Stars Friday program. Preps coming up for the Breeders' Cup were rescheduled from last weekend when washed out in New York for Wednesday's card. So some big time graded stakes action. The Grade 2 Pilgrim, Grade 2 Miss Grillo, both $200,000 races. They'll go as 5 and 7 on the card. Belmont at Aqueduct on Wednesday. So it's good to see some of these races midweek. It's like the old days of Keeneland, right? Stakes in the middle of the week.
Yeah. There's a filly running tomorrow in the Miss Grillo you mentioned that I'll be watching. I don't know how good she is. Her name is Camilla T, Irish bred filly by No Nay Never out of a mare by Warfront. She won her first start, her only start, at Monmouth Park, sprinting on grass back in mid-August. She did that going 5/8 of a mile. She won by 13 lengths, and she earned a 90 Beyer number. And I watched the race. She wears blinkers, and she really looks like a sprinter. But you never know. Go along on the grass, put her on the front end, maybe she just wires the field. So I'm going to be interested to see how Camilla T does, among others, in the Miss Grillo, which is an important stepping stone to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf.
She's owned by Victor Martinez, a former Major League Baseball player. So as the baseball playoffs start up tonight around the country, maybe Victor will be celebrating tomorrow with Camilla T running in the Miss Grillo Stakes. Keeneland, big weekend. Locke, the 2-year-old that I know you love the win at Saratoga for Pletcher. He's going to be one of the headliners in the Breeders' Futurity. You've been talking Locke as maybe the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile to this point.
I mean, I can't wait. I mean, this Keeneland is rapidly becoming my favorite meeting. And I'm not even talking about one or the other. I'm talking about both spring and fall. It's just the racing is so great, and it's such a launching pad for so many good horses. I can't wait to see that. Fortunately, the entries are out for opening day, I think Saturday as well.
And Sunday. They drew the
and Sunday. All right. Well, then I got lots to do in the next couple of days. Just to do that, I'll be doing some video for that. But really, key prep races for sure, and lots to learn at Keeneland in the opening weekend of the season.
Huge weekend in Kentucky, New York, and Southern California. The 3 megaplexes, if you will, for racing in America has all their final Breeders' Cup prep shined and ready to go for this coming weekend. And at Gulfstream Park on Saturday, they run the Princess Rooney used to be part of the Summit of Speed, one of the big races of the year outside of the championship meet at Gulfstream Park. That is this Saturday. Field is already drawn. It'll be our Express Bet race of the week, so be sure to check out my analysis of that coming up a little bit later in the week. Between now and then, be sure to join us on Friday for the First Call podcast, where Jeff and I will handicap 8 stakes races from around the country. The biggest challenge this week will be figuring out which 8 we want to do.
I'll have to pick them out of a hat, I think. There's about 18 of them I want to do, but we'll figure it out.
On behalf of everybody with First Technologies and my partner, Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you on Friday, everybody. Good luck at Keeneland.